So in this video I'm going to be talking about the difference between dried and fresh herbs when we're using them as medicines. So in herbal teas, for example, and this is what I'm going to show you today, you can use fresh herbs. So today you can see I've got some primroses and I've got some bay leaves that are fresh bay leaves, and they're fresh from my garden just this second. Now, if I'm going to be using these as a tea, here we go. I've got this as a, here's one I made earlier, example. So these have just gone into glasses of hot water. And you can see here, this is the primrose, and if you can see, it's starting to tinge. There's some yellowy green colouring in that. That's only been in there for 2 or 3 minutes, and already it's started to extract its medicinal properties in this tea. Now the reason for that is that these flowers are very delicate. So if we just come and look over here, so a primrose, there's not very much woody or stiff plant material that is a problem for the hot water to break down. So when the hot water hits these very, very light, gentle flowers, it is able to break through into the cellular structure which holds all of those biochemicals that are coming out into the water. So this is really great if you've got a really light flower or even leaves. So for example, something like lemon balm or mint, if it's quite young leaves. Feverfew is another example. Anything where the material is very light, very thin, the hot water will be able to do the same thing, and it will be able to extract. And the key thing to look out for is this colour change in your tea. So we'll probably leave this now for another 5 to 10 minutes. It would be absolutely fine to drink it now as a tea, but if we were going to use it as an infusion, something that's a bit more medicinal, then the longer we leave it, the more medicinal properties it can have. Now we can actually use leave infusions overnight to fully extract and then drink them cold the next day, but most people like to drink them hot, so it would be between 5 and 15 minutes for this type of infusion. Now, if we look at the other example of fresh materials, so this is our just bay leaf. It's not anything fancy. It is just common bay that you would use in cooking. Now, in the same way, I've added it to a glass of water. Now, if we look in comparison, this does not have any colour changes. There are no colour changes whatsoever. It really doesn't even give off a smell at this stage, even though there are essential oils in the leaf. Now the reason for that is because this plant material is really tough. Very, very tough. Now hot water, if you actually feel it's actually got a waxy surface, which is actually meant to channel water off of the leaves. That's why plants have that. But that means that it is going to be really, really difficult for any just simple hot water to break down any of those cell walls and be able to start any kind of extraction. So what we would need to do in the case of something that is tough like this, like this bay leaf, is we would actually need to dry it first. So if we dried this bay leaf, it would become brittle. Then when we added it to the hot water would be able to break open those cell walls, and it would change colour, and it would go a dark browny green. So that's what you would need to do with that kind of plant material. Anything there's really lots of thick stems, waxy or thick leaves, not roots, because really they actually need to be decocted, but anything that you're going to make into an infusion in this way, if we dry it, that will allow us to be able to extract the plant material. However, if we go back to our really pretty primroses here, now primroses that you can dry them and then use them as teas. But often what happens during the drying process is you actually lose some of those biochemicals which are having some of their medicinal properties that we want. So for example, in this case, primroses are often used as nervines and to reduce anxiety. So anything to support the nervous system, support people with depression and anxiety. So often the biochemicals that are responsible for these are often called light compounds, and these can be destroyed during the drying process. So actually having this as a fresh tea is an advantage. Obviously, if this dried plant material lasts a lot longer, so if you want to have a tea that you're going to keep in the cupboard, you're not going to be able to use fresh plant material. You are going to need to dry it, so you do need to weigh up the pros and cons depending on the plant that you're using, as whether you want to use it dried or you want to use it fresh. Now I've got an example here of a dried rosemary. So this is just rosemary leaf. I'll get it in the pot so you can see it dried. So the dried rosemary here, this is just, I'll put this on the plate. This is just your common rosemary. It is not a different kind that is medicinal. It is the common kind that you would actually use in cooking. Now, if you look at this, this is quite a rough chop, which is what I tend to use medicinally, rather than something that is very fine or a much finer chop that you often see in a little spice jar on your spice rack. Is often nowhere near. It would be probably a quarter of the size. So here we've got the dried rosemary. You can see now the dried rosemary is starting to change colour. Again, this hasn't been in the water very long. It's been in there for about 5 minutes. So I would leave this much longer, but you can see we've got the comparison. You've got the flowers. There's quite a lot of colour that's come out there. We've got some colouring in this one, starting to go, and nothing in this one. So this will change colour, and you will get an extraction, and you do get a different kind of extraction depending on the medicinal plant that you're using. So some might go red, some might go green, some might go brown. They can be all different colours, and that's just dependent on the plant constituents and chemicals within them. Will just depend on the colour that you get in the infusion. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just that you need to take into consideration the sort of plant material that you're using. What plant material do you have? If you've got fresh plant material and it's very light, that's absolutely fine. Go for it. You can pop it into an infusion. Something to bear in mind though, when you're using fresh plant material, you need about twice the amount in weight in comparison to what you would need in dried material for the medicinal properties, and that is simply because of the amount of water that is actually held within the plant structure. So you need to compensate for that. So you do need to have about twice the amount that you would have in a dried infusion. Oh, something to say as well, like I said about the primrose having different constituents in its fresh form. The same is also true of dried herbs. So once the herb goes through a drying process, certain biochemicals do break down, and sometimes that's beneficial. So some constituents, and one example would be in St John's wort and another one is in comfrey. Once that goes through the drying process, it actually becomes more stable and you get more medicinal properties out from a dried form than you sometimes do in a fresh form. Not necessarily that dried is better than fresh or fresh is better than dried. It's each individual herb depending on what is required and what you have, and how are you going to store it. And please see my other videos on storing herbs for more details on that. If you've got any questions about comparing fresh and dried herbs, please leave them in the comments.